This episode of Mr. Hutchings History is now streaming on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and all your favorite platforms like Castbox, Podcast Addict, and Amazon Music. Tune in now.
Welcome to Mr. Hutchings History, where the past comes alive. Let's dive into today's story.
Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're going beyond the battlefields. The typical World War II stuff. And we're going to explore its impact on Hispanic Americans.
Yeah.
We're using a pretty interesting educational podcast as our guide here.
And it's...
Trust me, this isn't just a regular history lesson.
Yeah, this is not your typical World War II story.
We're really talking about a community's fight for equality here. On the home front.
That's right.
A fight that still has echoes today.
And that's what's so interesting about it. We hear so much about the war in these big, broad terms.
Right.
But looking at it from the Hispanic American perspective, that's a whole other story.
Totally. And it's incredible. Over 500,000 Hispanic Americans served in the war.
Yeah.
That number alone is just, wow.
It's a powerful testament to their dedication.
Yeah.
Especially considering the discrimination they faced at the time.
Talk about commitment to freedom when you're not even getting it yourself.
To democracy, to those ideals, even when they weren't fully extended to them.
It's pretty amazing. And it makes me think about the 65th Infantry Regiment. You know the Borinqueneers?
Yeah.
Mostly Puerto Rican soldiers, a highly decorated unit.
Yeah.
And they still face segregation within the U.S. military.
Right.
That just blows my mind.
Imagine fighting for a country that doesn't even fully recognize you.
Crazy. And speaking of Puerto Rico, the island became a major military hub during the war, bringing even more people into the conflict.
Exactly.
So it wasn't just a mainland U.S. story.
Not at all. And, it wasn't just about the soldiers on the front lines either.
Oh, yeah?
Back in the U.S., Hispanic Americans, they were really stepping up on the home front, too, in those booming wartime industries.
Right.
And, there was a massive labor shortage, which led to the Bracero Program.
The Bracero Program. Okay, on the surface, it seems like a win-win. You got Mexican laborers coming in, filling those crucial jobs, supporting the whole war effort. But, there was a darker side.
Absolutely. The program, while it seemed like a good idea on the surface, it definitely exposed and exacerbated existing inequalities.
Wow.
These workers, they often faced terrible conditions, substandard housing.
Wow.
Low wages, rampant discrimination. It's really a reminder that even during these emergencies, national emergencies, these systemic injustices can persist.
They stick around.
Oh.
Wow. So it wasn't like, oh, great, the war is over, everything's perfect now.
Not at all.
Right. These issues became catalysts for later movements.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Right. For workers' rights and dignity.
For sure. And, we can't forget the women either.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, everyone knows about Rosie the Riveter.
Right.
The iconic image of women's empowerment during the war.
Yeah.
But, Rositas, their Hispanic counterparts, they were also working in factories, contributing hugely.
Right, alongside them.
Alongside them to the war effort, but facing similar disparities.
Wow.
In pay and opportunity.
So the war, it's like it gave these opportunities, but it also brought all these inequalities into focus at the same time.
Right. Yeah, it's like the fight for democracy abroad sparked this parallel fight for equality.
Yeah.
Back at home.
At home, exactly.
World War II wasn't just a turning point globally.
Right.
It was a turning point for the Hispanic American civil rights movement. They saw the hypocrisy too.
Like African Americans.
Yeah, like African Americans, exactly.
Fighting for freedom overseas, but then facing all this prejudice at home.
And discrimination.
And so out of that came organizations like the American GI Forum.
Right.
Tell me about Dr. Hector P. Garcia.
Yeah.
And the forum's mission.
Well, he was a decorated war veteran himself, and he founded the American GI Forum specifically to address these injustices that Hispanic veterans faced. They were being denied the benefits they deserved, which just shows you the barriers that continued after the war.
It's like winning on the battlefield and then coming home and still having to fight.
Exactly.
Wow. Speaking of battles at home, there's the story of Felix Longoria.
Yeah, his story is just heartbreaking.
Yeah.
But also so powerful. It really shows you how these individual tragedies can spark these larger movements for change. I mean, this guy, Mexican American soldier, killed in action.
Okay.
And he was denied a funeral service in his own hometown just because of his ethnicity.
You're kidding.
It's unbelievable, right?
That's crazy. That must just sparked outrage.
Oh, it did. It sparked a national outcry, forcing the nation to really confront this ugly reality of racism and discrimination. And ultimately, it led to Longoria being buried with full military honors at Arlington National Cemetery.
That's
a victory, hard one, but a significant one.
Yeah, it's like a story of how collective action can really challenge injustice.
Yeah.
And you see this theme throughout the whole Hispanic American experience during this time, wouldn't you say?
You see that thread throughout this whole period, but it's important to remember there are multiple perspectives here on how to interpret this period.
Yeah.
The source material actually outlines 4 different schools of thought among historians.
Okay.
Each one offers a different lens to view the past.
So break it down for me. You've got traditionalists, revisionists, social historians, and post-revisionists.
Yep.
It's like 4 different ways to look at the same thing.
It is. It is. So maybe let's start with the traditionalists.
Okay.
They really focus on the patriotism and the heroism of Hispanic Americans during the war.
Okay.
Emphasizing their contributions and sacrifices for the nation.
So for them, it's a story of Americans coming together, putting differences aside.
Yeah, unity for a common cause.
Okay.
But then you have the revisionists.
Right.
And they challenge that narrative.
Right.
They argue that, look, while Hispanic Americans definitely contributed, they did so while facing these huge barriers and discrimination.
So it's like 2 sides of the same coin.
Right.
And then we have the social history perspective. What's different about them?
Well, they shift the focus away from, these grand narratives and battles. They focus on the everyday experiences of regular people, especially those often ignored by the, traditional accounts.
Makes sense.
They're looking at families, communities, women on the home front.
So how did the war change their lives and relationships?
Exactly.
And last but not least, the post-revisionists.
Yeah. They kind of try to bridge the gap between all these perspectives. They want a more well-rounded understanding.
A balanced view.
A balanced view of the era. They see the heroism. They see the struggle.
It's complex.
They acknowledge the complexity.
Yeah. It's never black and white, right?
History is never black and white. It's full of contradictions and competing narratives.
Right. And it's good to remember these different perspectives because it gives us a better picture of what really happened.
Exactly. It helps us move past those simple interpretations and really grapple with the nuances of history.
Totally. And maybe it even helps us understand our challenges today.
You could say that.
That's a great lead-in to our next topic, the GI Bill. This was supposed to be this revolutionary thing. Education, home loans.
Yeah, for veterans.
But for Hispanic Americans, getting those benefits wasn't so easy.
It wasn't a smooth road. The GI Bill was groundbreaking, but it couldn't just erase all those prejudices and inequalities in American society.
So even though it was supposed to create opportunity, it wasn't equal opportunity for everyone.
Yeah, unfortunately not. You had segregated schools, limited access to good jobs, discriminatory lending practices. It was really tough. For many Hispanic Americans trying to get back on their feet.
So it's like their fight for equality didn't end when the war did?
No, not at all.
It just moved to a different battlefield.
That's a good way to put it.
Wow. The struggle just kept going.
Absolutely. They kept demanding the American dream.
That they fought to defend.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's amazing how all that, wartime experiences really shaped a whole generation of activists.
Right.
And basically laid the groundwork for what would become the Chicano movement.
The Chicano movement. It's like World War II planted a seed that grew into this whole movement.
It did. It really did. But how did that happen?
Yeah. How did those experiences actually translate into a fight for Chicano rights?
Well, you have to think about how many Hispanic Americans served in the military.
Yeah.
They came back with this new sense of confidence and a real understanding of what they had sacrificed for their country.
They'd proven their loyalty.
Yes.
Their bravery.
Yes.
But they still faced this discrimination when they came home.
It's not surprising that a lot of them became leaders in the Chicano movement.
Makes sense.
They brought all those skills they learned in the war, discipline, leadership, that strong sense of community.
So the war almost created a generation of leaders. Yeah, ready to fight for change.
Right.
And we can't forget about the GI Bill.
Right.
Even with its limitations, it did provide some educational opportunities for Hispanic Americans, leading to some upward mobility.
Right.
And more political awareness.
Yeah. Education can be so powerful.
Absolutely.
For that. Right. It gives people the tools to see the system, to make their demands, to organize.
It really does.
Yeah.
And that awareness was growing among Hispanic Americans at the same time as all this other cultural change was happening.
Right. And we talked about cultural hybridity earlier.
Yeah.
How did that specifically play into the Chicano movement?
Well, the war, all that movement of people, cultural exchange happening,
Right.
it created this heightened sense of shared identity among people of Mexican descent.
Okay.
And they started identifying as Chicanos,
Okay.
embracing their cultural heritage.
So taking pride in their roots.
Yeah, and using that as strength.
And it gave the movement a unique identity.
It did. And it was more than just a new name, right?
Right, right. It came through in art, music, literature, and, political organizing.
So the war almost created the perfect conditions for this movement.
Yeah, it's like one of those historical events with unintended consequences.
Yeah.
It's fascinating. And all this cultural awakening was happening alongside the fight against discrimination.
Right, which just got worse during the war.
Yeah. Think about the Zoot riots.
Oh, yeah.
A perfect example of how prejudice and racism
Right.
can erupt even during a time of supposed national unity.
Right.
They were targeting Mexican American youth just for their clothes.
So messed up.
It really shows that fear and resentment bubbling under the surface.
And progress isn't always a straight line.
No, not at all.
Even while they were supporting the war effort,
Right.
they were being targeted in their own cities.
Exactly. And those experiences, that
Yeah.
constant reminder that they were treated as second-class citizens.
It must have been so frustrating.
It fueled the anger that led to the Chicano movement.
So the war, it was like this crucible.
Yeah.
It created activists.
Yeah.
It created a shared identity, and it really fueled that resistance.
It's amazing how all those threads come together.
Yeah.
And the Chicano movement, with its demands for equality in education, labor rights, political representation.
It's a huge legacy.
It is. And it continues to inspire movements today.
One thing that struck me was their focus on education.
Absolutely. They knew education was the key to everything.
Breaking the cycle of poverty and discrimination.
Right. They fought for better schools, for culturally relevant curriculum.
Right, things like bilingual education.
Exactly. And better access to college.
Because education isn't just about facts, right?
Yeah. It's about giving people the tools
To challenge the system.
to make real change.
And they achieved a lot, right?
They did. Chicano studies programs, more funding for schools in Hispanic communities. Real change.
It really shows that education is a social good.
It is.
It's what drives social justice.
For sure. And it continues to inspire people today.
So we talked about the war as the start of the Chicano movement.
Mm-hmm.
But how do we see that fight for equality playing out today? How did their experiences back then shape things now?
That's a big question. It's not just about specific policies or organizations. It's about that legacy of resilience.
Okay.
Community organizing and challenging the way we even tell American history.
Like they rewrote the story.
They did. They brought in their own voices and experiences.
Powerful stuff.
It is. That's how you make change.
It makes us look at the past differently.
Yeah.
We see the people who were left out before.
Right.
And we see how their struggles are still relevant today.
And that's so important now,
Yeah.
When some people are trying to erase history, to
Yeah.
silence the voices that challenge them.
It's like a reminder that history isn't just neutral facts.
No.
It's about power. Who gets to tell the story?
Exactly.
And the Chicano movement.
Uh-huh.
They give us a model for how to do that.
They do. Cultural pride, community organizing, challenging the dominant narrative.
It shows us that we can reclaim history
We can change the story.
and make a more just society.
And that's a legacy worth celebrating.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So as we move to our last segment, let's
Yeah.
talk about representation.
Yeah, good point. We talked about how Hispanic Americans fought for recognition during the war.
Right. Both on the battlefield and at home.
Right. But that fight didn't end there.
Yeah, I feel like that's been a constant theme.
It has. This desire to be seen, to have their contributions recognized, to have a say in things, it didn't just go away after the war.
Right.
It's still going on today, maybe in different ways, but the core message is the same. Representation matters.
It makes you think, what if those voices had been heard all along?
Yeah.
But let's talk about now. What does this fight for representation look like in the 21st century, specifically for Hispanic Americans?
Well, one of the clearest examples is in politics.
Okay.
Hispanic Americans are one of the fastest growing groups in the U.S., but they're still so underrepresented in government.
Right, at all levels.
At all levels. It's a big gap.
Why is that?
Well, there's a lot of reasons. Historical disenfranchisement, the way voting districts are drawn, it's complicated.
But it's not just about the numbers, is it?
No, it's about the impact.
What happens when a whole group of people isn't being heard in the decision-making?
It means their needs, their perspectives, they're not being considered, and that leads to policies that don't really help them.
So it's not enough to just be at the table. You have to have a voice.
Exactly. But the good news is more and more Hispanic Americans are running for office.
That's great.
They're organizing, getting people registered to vote, demanding to be part of the process.
It's like they're picking up the torch from those who came before.
Yeah, and this isn't just in politics. It's everywhere.
Right, I was going to say.
Media, entertainment, education, business, you name it.
It's about seeing yourself represented in all those areas.
Not just as customers or workers, but as leaders.
Right, as the decision makers.
And for young people especially, that can be so powerful.
To see someone who looks like you in a position of power.
Exactly. Imagine a young Latina seeing a Supreme Court justice who looks like her, or a young man seeing a Hispanic CEO.
Yeah.
It breaks down barriers. It changes what you think is possible.
And it's not just individual. It's about changing the whole story of America.
Right. About who we are as a nation.
Celebrating all that diversity.
Making sure all voices are heard, all perspectives are valued, everyone has a chance.
Well said. We've covered a lot of ground today.
We have.
From World War II, the home front, the Chicano movement, to this fight for representation.
It's a pretty amazing chapter of American history.
And one that's often forgotten.
Yeah, but as we've seen, it's full of complexity, resilience, and this deep desire for equality.
And it's not over yet.
No, the fight continues.
For equal opportunities, for a voice in the future.
It's like history isn't just something in the past.
Right.
It's happening right now, shaping our world.
And we all have a part to play in what comes next.
That's right.
So to everyone listening, what will your contribution be? How will you use your voice to create a more just society?
It's not enough to just sit back and watch.
Right.
We all have to participate.
So let's learn from the past and work together to build a better future where everyone can thrive.
I'm with you on that.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Keep learning, keep questioning, and keep pushing for that better world.
Thanks for listening to Mr. Hutchings History. Keep exploring, and we'll see you next time.